Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773's Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. Company on Power Talk, thank you so much for making this part of your day today. Just want to give a shout out to Tom Bones Malone for knocking on people's doors and keeping people connected to humanity during this time, a very unpredictable time. And a time that, collectively, no matter what happens, whether we move in a light or dark direction, everybody has their own ability to control how they create positive change in the world. And my next guest is somebody who has been doing that non-verbally on the bandstand for years as a leader and as a prolific sideman. And one of the tragedies of this entire virus is just the idea that the one industry that has come to a screeching halt is basically, road dogging it or touring. And that's kind of the only way you make money in music today. Jeff Coffin, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear you, man. I wanted to know if you could talk to the audience about a time in your life when you were facing some adversity. It doesn't have to be on the bandstand, but ultimately, when you play your instrument, you dance. You make it look so easy. It's not easy. So, can you talk about a time in your life that you faced adversity, how you overcame it, how it's made you a stronger person?
Sure. Well, I live in Nashville. I've been here for going on 30 years now. And when I first moved to town, I had just gotten out of college. I had gone on a cruise ship for a couple of months to pay off all my school debt. And I moved here, and I was going through a bunch of weird throat issues where basically, Dizzy Gillespie's cheeks, that was happening to my throat. Not to as great an extent, but I was basically what I was calling bullfrogging. And what was happening is that there was too much back pressure when I was playing, and so it started to stretch the muscles in the neck, and I couldn't play. Like I was leaking air out of my nose when I was playing.
Wow.
I felt like my throat was about to tear, which was a horrible feeling when I would play. So I actually wrote to Mike Brecker up in New York. I got his information from the
What year?
New York
What year was
Musicians
this
Union.
roughly? What year was this?
This would have been 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got his address and I wrote him a letter. And I was trying to figure out what to do, because I had gigs, I was working, but I was in this really terrible predicament. And there was no place in Nashville at the time to try other mouthpieces or any of this stuff. And I was kind of going a little bit crazy. So about a month later, I got a phone call, and a person asked for me, and he said, "Hey, this is Mike Brecker," and I'm thinking, of course it is. Trying to figure out which of my friends is pulling my leg,
Dude.
And then he says, "I got your letter. I just got home from Europe. I got your letter, and I was calling to see how your throat was doing." I hadn't told anybody I had sent the letter. So it was Mike.
This is like pre-internet, so you're kind of based off the Musicians Union, hoping to get an address maybe from, and there was still a jingle market. He was almost, how much more time did he have left at that point?
He had a bunch.
He did. Okay. So, that is a spiritual,
years.
You reached out to him because you knew that he had the same condition?
Yeah, because he's kind of known for having that weird bullfrogging thing happening. And
interesting. That's so inside baseball. It's kind of treacherous and scary, but yeah.
Yeah. And so we talked about, this is back when you still had to pay for a phone call.
Oops.
so we talked for a while.
Yeah, man.
And talked about, how I play, what gigs I was doing, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, "I'm going to send you some information."
Repetitive.
This is back in 1991. Right.
So he had literature. He had literature. He had literature for you. It was reading.
Yeah, he had stuff on the throat, like on the pharyngeal and the laryngeal. And so basically we talked about gear, how I was playing, what gigs I was doing, what mouthpieces I was using.
Right.
And so, he made some recommendations. and then I saw a Brecker Brothers video that he and Randy had done, where Mike was wearing a wrap around his neck, and so I called him a couple of weeks later, and I said, hey, I don't know if you remember, we talked a few weeks ago. He said, oh yeah. He says, how's it going? I said, I said it's okay. I said I'm ordering some pieces, some mouthpieces to try out, and I said, but I saw this video where you were wearing something around your neck while you were playing. I said I was curious what that is, what it does, what effect it has. Should I do it? Blah blah blah. He said it's an ace bandage, and he says basically it holds my neck in. He says it keeps my neck warm. He says it helps it to heal when I'm playing. So and it was horrible to wear it. I got to tell you. But for
Dude,
a year,
are you this?
Every time I played for a year, I wore this thing. I changed mouthpieces, went to a mouthpiece that had less back pressure. But for every time I played, every time I practiced, every gig that I had, every session I did, I wore this thing. Society gigs in a tuxedo with an ace bandage around my neck. For a year, I wore this thing, and I got to a point where I had decided it's either healed or I'm done. Mm-hmm. And knock on wood, I haven't had an issue since.
Was there a point when you sort of, no matter what, it's to me like common misunderstanding among human animals is that they have the vanity to know who God is or what he is, when all the gods are the same. They all basically stand for the same thing. And I just wonder, at a certain point, did you ask for a sign? Did you commit spiritually and ask to be healed? Was there any kind of, because I mean, you're going through hell, man. I mean, your life is completely altered at that point, and you're probably getting calls for gigs in Nashville, and you can't play, or I don't know if you could play through that, but I mean that's nervous breakdown stuff. Did you at some point just surrender at that point? Have you ever been the same since?
No, there wasn't any kind of surrender or asking for divine intervention kind of thing. I mean, I knew that it was a physical issue going on, and I sort of trust the universe. I mean, mm-hmm. I'm sort of in that place where I'm like, okay, what's going to be is going to be, and but I had come to a point where I had resigned myself that, again, it was either healed or I was done playing. Like I couldn't do it anymore, and so thankfully it was the kind of thing that it had healed itself during that time, and I had gone back to the fundamentals of playing the instrument. I was really thinking about how I was breathing.
I mean, were you playing like? Was there a point where Jeff Coffin was playing like multiple horns at the same time, like Rasan kind of thing? I mean, like, were you really overextending? Is that how you get to a point when you get an injury like that? Is like you are
no.
Okay.
No, I wasn't doing that yet. This was previous to that. While I was on the cruise ship is when I started having these issues. And part of it is that I was playing a reed and mouthpiece setup that wasn't right for me on clarinet in particular. And I was also playing alto, which was not my main instrument. And so I got into some bad habits playing, I think is what it was. And it sort of exacerbated itself. And my body sort of was just kind of rejecting what I was doing. It's like, you can't play this way and continue playing like you play. And
well,
so
the universe said you're going to still
my neck, and,
the universe said you were going to continue to be a prolific bandstand musician. I wanted to. My third book is about to be published, and you're in it because one of the excerpts in chapter 4, which is entitled "Sing for Your Supper," is from a gentleman named Kofi Burbridge, and from an interview I did with him a few years ago. And I wanted to read this to you and then get your opinion on this. He said, and this let's expound on fatigue for a moment. I do remember a moment with an excellent combination of musicians that I played with in the Jeff Coffin Mutet. I'm talking about Felix Pastorius on bass, Jeff Sipe on drums, Jeff Coffin on sax, Bill Fanning on trumpet, and myself on keyboard. We'd been doing a tour, and it was dreadfully cold and a massive traveling. And there was this one day that we had been up against the wall with moving around, the conditions on the road, it was wearing us down bad. And then we had to play this bar where there was nothing but talk, talk, talk. Clearly the clientele were not into what we were doing. That's just another added weight. It just weighs down on you. I remember being so exhausted. We had been doing the material so much, and because of the intrusion of what we were going through that week, for some reason, when we started playing, some things were just happening automatically by themselves. I was able to watch it, quote unquote, so to speak, even though I was there playing. It was a chance to actually let things happen. It was so cool because the best stuff came out from being exhausted. Maybe the exhaustion wasn't doing it. It's the exhaustion allowed us to relax to a certain point where we just weren't thinking about anything else. It was one of the best moments of my life. And that was from my radio interview with him from 3 years ago, and that's going to be in my third book, man. So I don't know if I want you to talk about exhaustion, being sick on the bandstand, and pulling out a primordial performance, because that's the only thing that you can think about is just surviving and getting into bed or something.
Sure. Well, let me say this about Kofi.
Yeah, please.
He was, a genius on every level, and it broke my heart when he passed, man. I mean, I was a wreck. Let me just say that. And I had talked to him 2 days before he passed, and he was fine. Everything was cool. And we wrapped, and he's like, man, I'm walking around. He says, I'm going to be good. He says, I should be out of here, in a few weeks. And he said, I'm hoping to be back on the road next year. He says, I'll be playing by the fall, et cetera, et cetera. And then 2 days later, man, he was gone. Like, something happened, and he was gone. And, we talked about education. We talked about the importance of stuff. And he said, it's interesting, man, because he said, man, I really miss playing with you. I miss being around you and being with you guys. And he says, the thing I miss the most, he says, are those education clinics that we do, working with kids and, opening them up, like getting them up to play and hanging with them and all that. And he says, man, he says, you got to keep doing that stuff. I was like, oh, I am. He says, no, he says, really? He says, man, you got to keep doing it. And I said, for sure. I said, I'm still doing it. And, and it was interesting. It was almost prophetic in some ways, because education has been such a big part of what I do. And, and Kofi was great with kids, man. He was so open and he had such a beautiful sharing spirit. And, I miss him all the time. I still have one of his hats in my garage.
I would, bet I didn't know him. It was, I guess, shocking. And then to lose somebody that you did, I guess at the end of the day, I watched a clip of you guys playing a performance that I would have just been getting off on with that group, and it was really stretched out. I mean, you left the bandstand, and like Kofi went off, like played as many bars as he wanted, and then you came back in and just started blowing, and like so. I mean, do you remember that specific incident that he's talking about? You guys were just grinding, and then it was he left his body, man. He left his body that night. In the music.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, I do remember it. And I remember it being a club where, like, you walk in, and then the club, like, the part was downstairs that we played in. But, yeah, I mean, we played a lot together. I mean, we toured a lot together. We made a few records together. And, but, yeah, exhaustion is a tough thing, man, because you're in sometimes 2-3 cities a night. With Dave Matthews, like, we'll be in 3 cities in one night sometimes, or in one day, rather. And,
Explain how that works. You start somewhere, go to a gig, play the gig, then you go to fly somewhere else and you sleep, and you get there all. Is that what am I hearing that correctly?
We play Boston.
Yeah.
And so we wake up in Boston. We play the gig. And then like let's say that we fly overnight to, let's say, Chicago. We do the gig in Chicago, then we fly after that gig to, Cincinnati or something. So within a 24-hour span, we're in 3 different cities.
Wow. Yeah, you don't even know where you are after a while. I mean, that's the
After
life.
a while,
That's
yeah.
the kind of like that's kind of a jazz life too. I mean, but even more, but much more rugged travel. Um, I mean, to me, I'd like you to talk a little about, that ability when you recognized that, you get out of your own way and you allow the
Hmm.
music to come through you, and you're a conduit for information coming through you from the heavens. That's always.
Sure.
I just want you to talk about how you learned to channel that and recognize that your ego was the only thing that was in your way, or in your case,
Yeah.
actually, like you did have a physical injury that you overcame. So, Mazel Tov.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Getting out of your way, that's a tough one, man. Giving yourself up to the music. I look at music as a service industry, that we serve the music first, we serve the musicians we're playing with second, and we serve the audience third. So I'm at least fourth on that list. And that's the way I look at it. It's like the music is so much more important than anything else. And if I'm leading that way, if I'm leading with that thought and that intention, then I think we're going to be okay. And I think the other thing is, playing with musicians who inspire you. Always trying to surround yourself with musicians who are better than you.
Sure.
And so that's what I've tried to do for my entire career. Since I started taking my own group out, I was just like, man, I want to play with these guys because they're so inspiring to me, and I'm going to learn from them. They've got experience that I have never had before. And even though I was playing with the Flecktones already when I took my group out, I had never had any experience of taking a group out. And it's by far, I'll be honest with you, man, it's by far the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life is to lead
Dude, no,
bands.
I know it's really
Yeah.
there are people that really, I mean, like Johnny Vodakovich, dreads it, hates it. It's just anyway, go ahead, keep riffing.
Yeah. It's super challenging. And so when you're dealing with, all the things a road manager would do, because I did everything early on.
Absolutely,
Everything.
you wanted to keep the money,
And,
yeah.
and then you have to play the gig at night. Then you have to check everybody into the hotel, and then you have to get per diems, and then you have to do this. You have to collect the money, and it's so much that.
After a while, it becomes everything but the music. Yeah.
The music is the sanctuary, man. That's what we work so hard to get to is those 2 or 3 hours on stage. And so the way I look at it too, man, is like I don't get paid to play. I get paid for all the other stuff I have to do.
David Nelson said
until
that,
I
man. That's what
actually
David
get to
Nelson
the
said. Yeah,
stage.
new Riders of the Purple Sage. He said the same thing. He's like, people think I get paid
Yeah.
to play. He's like, no, it's for it's for the grind. I guess
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
how have you learned to, can you talk to Katz about getting off in, I don't want to say Dave Matthews is a Formula Trip gig. I actually haven't seen him live ever, but I don't think it's, it's not, you're not going to be, getting it confused with like the Plug Nickel sessions or something. And I just wonder about,
Well, you'd be surprised if you haven't seen the band live. You'd be surprised, man. There's a lot of blowing going
is it
on.
so? I mean,
in that band.
so I mean, is there? Tell me, because I'm naive to this stuff. I'm not hip to it.
Yeah.
Can you like definitively say that you can stretch out and basically there are no bound? Does it ever get to the point where there are no boundaries?
I think pretty much most of the time. I mean, as far as improvisationally,
Are you kidding? Like, how long are the tunes? I didn't think it was that stretched. I mean,
it varies, man. It varies night to night.
wow.
We do probably 25 or 30 tunes a night, but our sets are 3 hours long, 2 hours and 45 minutes, 3 hours. It's not unusual. But there's also song form. It's a very interesting and unique band, and I don't know that there's ever been Well, I can say that definitively, there's never been another band like it.
Explain
And
exactly what makes it unique.
well, I think that part of it is the leadership from the top with Dave. Um, Originally, he's from South Africa, so a lot of his musical sensibilities um, kind of come from there. And he's a brilliant songwriter.
The rhythms, you mean? The
He's
way
surra-
do you think the rhythms of South Africa
yeah, the
yeah,
rhythms
okay.
and sort of the especially the simplicity of the verses a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
and then like he'll go into these beautiful bridges, like these really complex, beautiful bridges or choruses that offset things. It's just it's there are people that just are able to write like that,
Right, it's a gift, yeah.
and he's one of those
Yeah,
people.
absolutely.
But when he was in Charlottesville, he met Carter Beauford and Leroy Moore, and they put the band together. Those guys are jazz guys, and
Oh my God, they were playing
so
in a fusion power trio or something?
well, no, it just kind of started off with them just sort of hearing Dave's stuff and playing a little bit, and then
Right.
Stefan, I think, was 15 or 16 when he joined the band,
Oh,
and
damn,
Stefan was a
dude.
jazz bass player. He was playing upright gigs, doing standards, and playing jazz. And so all the guys in the band came from a jazz background,
Oh
and
man, dude. Everybody in the band right
um,
now has that I don't want to say pet. Everybody is a jazz street scholar. Like they've played
yeah,
the shit.
yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
So I
And
mean, could Dave
and we
play?
still do.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
We
is
still
Dave
do.
does after you? You have to hit me to the stuff, but I mean, do you have any just pure instrumental tunes?
There's one that we don't play very often. We usually play it as a tribute to Leroy when we play it.
What's it
But
called? Is there a name for it?
no,
Or-
but there's a lot of stuff that has a lot of instrumental parts to it. Like sections that are that are instrumental.
Exactly. So the song form is really strong too. It's diverse. It's not just
Yeah.
yeah.
But the thing about the song form with that band is it's asymmetrical. It's not like there's always 16 bars in the verse and then the bridge is 12 bars or the chorus is 8 or this. It's not the same, and that's been one of the most challenging things about this gig for me, especially when I was learning the catalog, which is now probably close to 200 tunes. But when I learned the catalog, it was about 150 tunes. And the tunes are not symmetrical. It's not like you're playing an AABA form. It's just not what it is. And so the horn parts also, because originally they were improvised by Roy, and then with me and Rashawn Ross, who plays trumpet in the band, those are parts that we have to play, and the parts aren't the same chorus to chorus either, or verse to verse. So it's in some ways it's kind of what we call through compose.
What did you say? What kind of composed?
Through, like you go through something, it's through compose, meaning that the form never really repeats.
Right. Is that does that become tedious? Tedious is the wrong word. Is it different every night, or is it something that you just have to?
No,
Yeah.
it's not actually. Not in the sense of the form of the tune.
Right.
The form of the tune usually, unless we have a train wreck, which has happened before, and
but those are sometimes
suddenly,
the best things to happen. You go off the rails, and then you got to come back on. I mean, that's the music that I love the most. Urgency. I guess here's the point: is like, I mean, to be in front of thousands of people is going to jack you up no matter what. I just, to me, the music that I love the most, and that you touched on in the mutet, is like, there's a pulse. There's urgency, there's dynamics, and basically you're playing as if it's life or death. And even in some sort, and I ask you this, do you really? I mean, because I really think it's important, whatever happens and however things shake out, and however hopefully we'll still have a civilization or some sort of society moving forward. But it's like basically the fact that you teach. Can you talk about Do you really believe the language of melodic improvisation, which is jazz, but that word is bastardized in some ways? Do you think that jazz can be taught, can be codified and taught in the academy, or can you really only learn how to play that kind of, following the music? I mean, that exhaustion music, like letting go, playing to the heavens, losing time and form. Can that only be learned on the bandstand?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and something I've actually put a lot of thought into lately, because I've been teaching in Vanderbilt University for 6 years now,
Oh,
and I've done well over 300 clinics around the country and around the world over the last however many years. And so one of the things is how do you teach improvisation? Like what is improvisation? How do you teach it? How do you get students to do what you're talking about? And so I've come to the conclusion recently, actually,
good.
only in the last few months, that teaching people how to play through chord changes is different than teaching people how to improvise, or it's different than improvisation. So the idea of playing through chord changes is, how do you sort of navigate your way through using sound through a pre-subscribed or pre-subscribed set of chord changes,
Right.
like the blues, for example.
Right. But you got to play through that, though. Yeah.
And so how do you get through that in a way that makes musical sense, okay?
Right.
So for some people, they are kind of born into a family or an area where it just happens like that,
How often do you find that these cats are autodidacts or learn by ear first before they learn to read?
It's not as often as it used to be, for sure.
No, I'm saying the ones that are gifted, like the ones that come from those families that just like their ears are wide open. Like, I just feel like did you learn to hear music first before you learned to read it?
Yes and no. Yes and no.
I mean, where did your ears grow the most? I don't want to lose this train of thought. You say playing through chord changes the way the nasty, like Chitlin Circuit blues players could do, and then improvising. Those are two separate things. But this is a revelation for you.
Well, no. The thing that I'm talking about is, like, if I put chord changes in front of a student, like a tune like Stella by Starlight or something.
Right.
If I put the chord changes in front of them, getting them to understand how to get through those chord changes is different than actually improvising over the chord changes. Because improvisation, first of all, let me say this. Improvisation, the word improvisation has nothing to do with music. Has nothing to do with music. It has a Latin root of improvisus.
Oh, is it all charades and gimmicks and stuff? What is it, man?
No. It has a Latin root of improvisus, which literally translated means unexpected or surprise.
Oh, beautiful,
unforeseen.
beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
So the intention behind the word is that. So we can use it in music, we can use it in dance, we can use it in conversation, we can use it walking down the street. We're improvising all day long, right? So we just have to figure out the tools then to navigate through whatever it is that we're doing to do that at a high level. If you're an improvising dancer, you can just kind of go willy-nilly. But if you get in and you're trying to dance with other people, it's just not going to fly.
Right. Well, not without a lot of trust,
Well, right, and not without a lot of foundational training either.
Right, exactly.
And so part of what we do as educators is to work on the fundamentals with the students, so that they have an understanding of the vertical nature of harmony as it's moving along horizontally. And so once they understand that, once they understand the bones of the chord, okay, the bones provide structure. Like if you think of your skeletal system, it provides your body structure. It allows you to actually be upright. If you didn't have a skeleton, you'd be a blob on the floor. There'd be no definition, no structure. And it's the same with the chord. If you don't understand the bones of the chord, there's no way you're going to be able to play through it, unless you come from this sort of by rote teaching, where you may not understand
Here's
exactly
the thing. No,
the same
okay.
thing.
So, but I mean, how much do you recognize that? Um, the the Schillinger School, which is what Berkeley was called the year before it changed to Berkeley in '69. That was
Hmm.
a school where like cats like Lenny Tristano, or I'm sorry, Charlie Mariano would come off the road as already a professional working musician and
Yep.
learn a new instrument, or just get off the road because it was eating them alive, and now they've become so you can give all the students everything they need, but the touring circuit that allowed
Hmm.
professional musicians to be professionals. I'm talking about
Right.
essentially like they created farm systems and they developed new leaders
Hmm.
and that whole thing that does not exist today. And even the masters of the music that where the jazz music is consumed overseas, they'll play 24 gigs in 26 cities. There's different places. So there's no
Yeah.
long engagements. Anyway, my point is, do you feel like what is the most significant thing that you can give these cats before they go into a world where basically, and I say this, my heart breaks saying it, but unless you are, unless you've sort of got some name recognition and, otherwise you're part of the, if you're playing creative, authentic music, you're part of the working poor.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right, pretty much.
And so how do you because I mean, I would feel like I would say, okay, you obviously have plenty of time to get on the bandstand, get stuff out of your system, have fun. But with these cats, it was a different paradigm when you were coming out. So really, what is the most important thing that you can give them for them to go into a world where, it's just, I don't know. I mean, what is the answer?
Well, how do they work? Is that what you're saying? What do we
Well,
give
I
them
mean,
so they're
to
able
me,
to have a career in music?
well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, schools, what can they transfer over to the bandstand if they happen to be blessed enough to get into a working band? When they can really get on the bandstand, what's the best thing that you can
Well,
give them?
Yeah, there's a lot of things actually, and I would say that like not everybody who's playing creative music is poor. I would say that. I would just take a step back and say that because I feel like every night with Matthews that we are playing creative music, and and we're not poor.
No, you're not.
There's a
No,
lot
no,
of
no, no.
bands
I
out.
wasn't talking about you.
No.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying though is that there's a lot of musicians out there who are playing creative music that are able to make a living. But I think that if you're, I think the music you're talking about is sort of a little bit more of the traditional, like the stuff that people aren't really listening to.
It's not pop
it's hard to
music.
make
It's not pop. Yeah.
It's hard to make a living playing music. There's
Yeah,
no question about that.
I did.
But the things that we can give them, that I can give my students, is a solid understanding of the fundamentals, is a solid understanding of the importance of relationships, is a solid understanding of like being able to be responsible.
Right. How to keep a gig. Yeah.
How to keep the gig, how to get the gig. Like you may get the gig the first time. Like you might, let's say you move somewhere, somebody hears about you, somebody says, oh, hey man,
Exactly.
there's this young cat, he's just moved into town. Let's give him a shot. Okay, so maybe you get the first gig. What do you have to do to get called back again? And
Exactly.
a lot of times it has nothing to do with how you play. It has to do with who you are. And that's part of it. So really what we're teaching these students, we're teaching them life, but we're using music as the metaphor. And a lot of them are still looking for their metaphor. Not all my students are music majors.
Dude, I think you just did you patent that statement? That's an insane statement you just riffed on there.
Oh, about the music being the metaphor?
Yeah,
well,
man, I've never heard that's
true.
a patent statement. That's a beautiful statement.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think it's true.
No, you do, but you're doing
it
it as a metaphor through the music. That's the beautiful part of it. Yeah.
right.
Here's my question though: why? I am definitely into improv. I want to be in a preferably smaller venue at the front of the stage, in front of the PA system, so I can just get the vibration, the all the vibration coming from the bandstand sound, and I want it to be in that realm, and I also want cats to have their own individual sound. And I ask you, why, my feeling is this: is that I don't listen to modern well, putting pop music aside, I don't listen to modern jazz a lot. But I would say I have a very difficult time identifying who the person is that's playing, because there's a lot of comping of styles, and I wonder how. I know because you have your own individual sound, because you're like a sonic mirror, and you just like. Have you always danced while you played?
Probably. I never do it until I saw a video.
It's so cool, man. I was like looking at it. I'm like, this is so amazing, because it looks like, I don't know. It's pro ball. But I mean, is that something? How do you work with? Because these kids are young. They're still insecure. They don't have a lot of experience. It's not like they're going to be like blowing like freaking Pharoah Sanders or something. But maybe some of them are. Right. But how do you let them follow that muse, that Jeff Sipe, Rockalum, Bob Moses, spirituality? How do you get there?
Well, I think you have to unlock it with students, and that's something that's a challenge, quite honestly. Like my students come into Vanderbilt, they're really smart. They're privileged to go to Vanderbilt. There's no question.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that they're all rich by any stretch, because they're not, but they are privileged to get to go to that school. They've had great grades. It's a very high academic standard. These students know how to take direction, right? So
that's classical. That's classic. Yeah, exactly.
My job.
Yeah, I love this. They're interested in direction, and you're like, I am not the I'm not the freaking conductor, dude. Do not take direction. Go, be yourself.
Right.
That's a challenge, man.
Well, it is, and so a lot of times, when they start studying with me, my teaching method is different than most, where I'm asking them more questions than they're asking me. And so they'll play, and I'll say, okay, what did you think? And they'll look at me like, what do you mean, what did I think? They're not used to being asked these things necessarily.
It's incredible.
Jesus. And so part of my sort of peeling them inside out has to do with these things. Has them, I've got them listening.
So give an example. How do you do it? You put old records on? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get them to listen to people like Archie Shepp, Ornette, Coltrane, Cannonball, Miles. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Dude, you got to get them to play like it's the understand. I'm telling you right now, the tunes in the late 60s, like 67, 68, there were a couple of jazz crusader tunes and Les McCann tunes. Somehow there's this merging of blues and jazz. Like the blues has gotten too separated away from jazz now. So, and part of that is what you said. These are far from rich kids, but privileged kids. This is not a street music the way it once was. It was basically a black subculture through the 70s. I mean, Liebman said that.
Right.
I mean, this is like, so it's interesting. I appreciate you bringing up the Tokyo. Do you wind up cracking the egg sometimes with cats where all of a sudden you've unpeeled them and like they're on their way? Like, do you see that? Because that to me would be inspiring.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, well, I mean, one of our former students, one of my former students, is a piano player named David Rogers, and he's been playing with Keb Mo and Taj Mahal. And he's living here.
I just talked to Taj yesterday because I had to get permission on the book.
David is young. He's like 23 and maybe 24 now, and he's an incredible musician. And when he started studying with me his last couple of years at Vanderbilt, he hadn't been improvising for a great length of time. But I was giving him I heard him play, and when he came to me, I said, man, you're a really wonderful musician, David. I said, and I don't play piano. I said, your left hand is really weak. And I said, you use the sustain pedal too much. And I said, and you get by on the things that you know how to do. I said, And so I was giving him all this incredible music to study, and Jarrett and all this.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and he would leave me messages at like 2:30 in the morning, being like, "Man, this Art Tatum side is blowing my mind."
Was it just
I'd have him
you,
him like working on Oscar Peterson stuff, like two-handed Oscar Peterson stuff in 12 keys.
So
And he was doing it,
do you think he found?
And,
I mean, I guess that's the point. Is like through that process, because those are those are the masters of it. Are you trying to split his brain? Like you said, he kind of get stronger bass lines in the left hand, stronger rhythm.
Well, I was trying to even his hands out. So when he first came to me, I said, "Okay, so I'm going to have you playing Charlie Parker solos with your left hand." And so I had him doing omnibook stuff with his left hand. Then I would have him transcribing stuff, and then doing like 4 bars with his left hand and 4 bars with his right hand. I was like, it has to be even, And I remember he told me when he was done, I think he stayed with me for 1.5 years. And after the first semester, he said, "Man," he says, "playing those bird solos with my left hand did more for my left hand than any classical etude I've ever worked on in my life."
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And then
That's insane.
we talked about that Clifford solo on Cherokee, that insane Clifford Brown solo on Cherokee.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
So for my birthday the year after that, this was a couple of months after he graduated, he said, "Man," he says, "check your inbox." So he had learned Clifford's solo on Cherokee two-handed at tempo with the recording, sent it to me on my birthday. I was like, dear God, man.
Let me ask. Let me play devil's advocate for. I mean, because you just challenge me on this, because to me, a lot of we've become a much more visual society. We were essentially an auditory society for a large part of last century.
Sure.
And I just wonder about so while you're working on evening his hands out. For him to get his chops up and his facility to a degree, why can there not be 3 other cats in there of equal ability in a quartet setting? Like, to me, it's too much one-on. Like, all the cats from years ago that studied in New Orleans, like, those schools were like, it was all communal. It was like all bands, is what I'm saying. I mean, I know you probably have band.
Right.
I know you probably pair people up, but don't you? It would be hard to teach if everybody's evolving at one time, but I just feel it's like in isolation. I mean, he's playing with Taj Mahal. That's freaking great. I mean, that's beautiful blues music. It's just in my world, I feel like the lab bands that Bones and Marini and, Fowler were in, plus they were gigging, playing like R&B gigs. How close enough do you get to putting together, an Art Farmer quartet or something,
Well, we do small groups at the school, and so these kids are. So I work with the top small group at Vanderbilt also, and since I started working with that group, they've been autonomous. I told them, I said, "Look, you guys are doing the arrangements, you guys are doing the compositions. I'll come in and I'll help you with some of this stuff. I'll make some suggestions. We'll try things." I said, "But you guys are doing." I said, "You're going to have a 3-ring binder. You're going to have music in your folders, and I said, you guys are going to count off all the tunes." And I said, "I'll be here to kind of help shape things." I said, "But you guys are going to do the work." And so, like this semester, for example, that's the only thing I go in for. All my lessons are online, but I go in for small group. We're in a big room. Everybody's distanced. Everybody's in masks. Wow. In the 4 weeks that we've been meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Every student has brought in 3 tunes. There's 7 kids in the band. So we've got 20 plus tunes in the repertoire. And we're so we can only play for 30 minutes at a time. Then we have to take a 15-minute break. We'll go outside and we'll work on a tune outside, and we'll learn it by rote. And then we'll go back in and we'll continue to play. And so we are giving them those experiences of playing together. So the top combo also, part of our job, of course, is to get them opportunities to play and to go out there and sit in and be heard, these kinds of things. And I did this in North Texas also with like the Dallas Jazz Orchestra, the Collection Jazz Orchestra. I was doing gigs while I was in college. So it's the same kind of thing.
But let me ask you something. Let me ask you, if COVID disappeared magically or was never here, would those cats have the same opportunities to gig that you had and that Fowler had consistent? Like those guys had. Those guys might have been working 6 nights a week. I don't know how many nights a week you were working outside of school, but these cats, I gather, are not working outside of school.
Not a lot, but you have to realize also that, Nashville it's a music town. I mean, there are so many musicians here.
Yeah, I know it's cutthroat. That's also part of the issue. Like, I mean, that goes into the whole mechanization of music. They've taken so many jobs away from people. It shouldn't be like that. But it has to, it's all. Right. It's always been cutthroat. Right. I dig that, But I'm just saying, like, that to me, Johnny Vidakich was on, the riverboats stopping in Vicksburg, Mississippi, up to St. Louis, partying with the locals. Right. It was anarchy. Like, it was insane. I'm not saying it was like healthy, but you really I'm bummed that there are not enough, that our government and the people of our society do not look at music as healing and subsidize a lot of this stuff, because it's like one reason we're so divided is because we have no soul. The body of the car is very sleek, but there's almost no soul in the body. I mean, I've been doing my show 10 years. So like I started for some reason. I started because I recognized that there was a fever going on, and I just think the propensity of, or that the way that society looks, like, that's the other word. What do you think about the word playing music? What do you think? Charlie Persip told me, he's like, we ain't playing music, man. We're not playing. Somehow that word got connotated into, musicians can play for free, or they can play for the door. And I'm talking about Steve Miller or Tower of Power or Dave Matthews. I'm just talking about in general, like, there used to be the Italian bistro gigs, and the cost of living wasn't so high. I'm not trying to be Pollyannish. Right. I'm just trying to, and you're not. No, you can't solve all these issues, but I'm just saying, tell me realistically where, percentage-wise, how many of these cats can walk out and sing for their supper?
It's hard to say, man, because there's, again, not all of my students are music majors, but the music majors who are there, I think there are opportunities. I do. And, music has become much more commercial than it used to be. But there are opportunities for composers in particular. There are opportunities for people that, want to become engineers. For players, it's always been tough, man. I don't know that that's any different, but I will say this, that there are more players now than there have ever been, period. And there's a much higher level of musician than there's ever been because of the internet. It's directly attributable to the internet, something that can be used for good or for social media. And so you have these multi-instrumentalists who are crushing, but it's still hard. I mean, even Cannonball and guys like Hank Mobley and Train. Train was doing pretty well. I mean, he was living, pretty well middle class out in Long Island.
I'm from Long Island, man.
It was a struggle, man. The music that he was playing, people were not digging it at the end.
Dude, let me tell you something.
They were expecting Blue Train and Love Supreme and all this, and he was going like Interstellar Space and that whole kind of thing, which, that's hard music to listen to.
You know why, though?
It's beautiful music to play, and it's hard music to listen to. And I don't know, there's a lot of guys. Mingus, Jesus, man, like one of the geniuses of our time. He had a tough time, man.
Dude, listen, man,
he was not well-to-do.
Dude, this is how Barry Melton, the Fish, from Country Joe and the Fish, he told me he saw Mingus at the end of his career, at the end of his life, at the Both And Club, he was broke, and he's like, "This is how we treat our American heroes," you know. And
Right.
you recognize that,
Right.
I wanted to, and we're gonna have to do set two because we just have so much more to get to. But I wanted to read this to you. I just did this interview with. Are you hip to the drummer Joe Chambers?
Oh yeah, very
Okay.
much so.
Okay, so we just did our second interview after 8 years. So I've been on this. I've been cutting my way out of the woods with a machete for a long time. But this is what he said, and I wanted to. You can just riff on it any way you want. He said, as I said with Clifford Brown and Max Roach, that was Max's band. But the Eurocentric attitude of this country, the United States, is that a drummer cannot be a composer, and that carries over from Europe. The whole attitude of Caucasians and Caucasian culture in Eurocentric music carries over to this very day. This is systemic, institutionalized bias. They had this, the writers, journalists like myself, although I pray I wouldn't, even though I was born in 78, I prayed that I wouldn't have been writing this stuff, had this term they used called avant-garde. They were talking about the free jazz. Stanley Crouch, rest in peace, said, the free avant-garde music is what Blue Note was doing in the mid-'60s. Not Shep, not Eiler. It was more like the Joe Henderson and the Bobby Hutcherson albums of the mid-'60s that Chambers was on, Freddie Hubbard. You could hear all the tradition in those Blue Note recordings. We could swing, we could play the blues, and we could run through changes. Those cats, Eiler and Shep, were around doing their thing, but they couldn't play no tunes. They couldn't play no changes. Those cats were playing altissimo, squeaks and squawks. They couldn't get a job at Radio City or backing up a singer. Eric Dolphy doesn't belong in that group because Eric was a traditional musician. He knew everything and played in the orchestra. Pharoah Sanders was playing changes way back then. And this is Interstellar Space, what you just referenced. Even when Train started doing the altissimo, they accepted it because they had heard him play before. All they could do is what they did. Shep got better, and as of today, he can play changes. You can take that anywhere. To me, it's like for a 42-year-old rogue journalist who's, that's why Bones connected us, obviously, is because, we're both, I've been operating on this frequency. I'm not a musician, but I am trying to be an advocate because there are no advocates for freaking musicians besides musicians. And I just look and I just say, what do you feel about that whole idea? Because you hip your kids to Shep, even though Chambers is basically saying, yeah, we saw them wanking it, but they weren't real musicians.
Well, I don't know that Joe Chambers would ever say that Archie Shep wasn't a real musician. I mean, every musician that I know,
I'll send you the interview. Yeah, no, it's fine.
To be legendary, and Shep can definitely play changes. There's no question about that. There's beautiful records with Shep playing changes. One of my favorite records of his of the last, one of my favorite records of the last 25 years is a duo record he did with Mal Waldron called Left Alone Revisited. And they're doing tunes. It's all dedicated to Billie Holiday, and it's gorgeous. It is, the way that Shep plays, Shep is not a bebop player. He's not coming out of Charlie Parker. Archie Shep has a way of playing that is, it's humanity. I mean, it's like, it's the voice. And, there's a way of connecting that he has that is, unlike anybody else, I think, and unique to him. It was the same with Ornette. Ornette was a folk musician.
I just
Ornette
want,
a blues musician, and so I think with these guys, look, Stanley Crouch used to be an avant-garde drummer. He was a free jazz drummer, and then he turned his back on the music and whatever. I mean, I don't really care. There's no statutes of critics, so I don't really give a shit what they say about my music or anybody else's. It's like their opinion. It's like Facebook.
Let me ask you a question. Because like Chambers said, Shep as of today has gotten a lot. He can play changes, but I'm just talking about when you look at the time when jazz was actually. Here's what Crouch was talking about: is that the music that Oblique is a great album. There was Andrew Hill albums, Freddie Hubbard. The reason that was the real avant-garde music is because it was the ability was to be. It was commercial. It was commodified. Whereas the other cats, at that point in their careers, couldn't play changes, couldn't play the blues, and could not get a gig. You just wonder if you were a professional musician at that time, would you have at that time respected that? Because to me it's fascinating because it was a time when the music that we love was it was actually commercial music, and that there were like AM stations that would play a Charles Earland tune for 12 minutes. Like it's quite remarkable. And
Right.
I guess Crouch was a free drummer, so he knew what those cats were like at that time. I just found it fascinating that Chambers, he just dropped that knowledge on me last week, and it was like, because you listen to that mid '60s. I'm not talking the soul prestige stuff. I'm talking the sixth breaking point. It was pretty free, but yet those guys were musicians. But you still respect those cats, Eiler and those guys, because
I love Eiler. I mean, Eiler could play changes. Eiler could play the crap out of changes. And if I mean, but he was going for something different too. I mean, Eiler was kind of like Steppen in that sense, that his communication was a different kind of thing, and he really wasn't about playing changes for him. It was about something different, and I mean, look, here's the thing, man. It's like, we're all different musicians. Some people, think about Van Gogh, for example. As an artist, never sold a painting in his lifetime.
Right,
I bet there's a bunch of people that wish they had bought one. You dig? And so sometimes it's like, when I got a chance to hang with Ornette a few times up in New York.
Really?
And from his mouth to my ears, he told me that he was playing a gig one time, and these are the words he used. He says, this gentleman came up to me while I was playing, took the horn from my hands, and put it in the garbage can.
Wow.
And he asked me, this was 50 years later, man. He asked me, he said, why would someone do something like that? And I was almost in tears, man. I swear to God.
Dude, that is the heaviest story I've heard in a long time, dude. So you back in '61 that happened, or what? I mean, like when he was first.
Yeah, it was sort of the late '50s, early '60s.
Yeah, right. I did.
Shape of Jazz to Come came out in 1959.
Holy cow, dude! Somebody put his horn in the trash can.
Yep. And so, I mean, look, here's the thing. Like Louis Armstrong called Ornette anti-jazz, and there were a lot of people that said this is a bunch of crap. Well, I think we've realized that it's not, that music is representative of so many different things, and there are people who have a very myopic view of that. And all due respect, I think Stanley Crouch was one of those guys that had a very myopic view of music.
I love it. He liked
what he liked.
I love this, dude.
Everything else was shit. And okay, that's fine, man. You can have that opinion. Don't expect people to agree with you. And it's almost it's like these days, man. Like the people who yell the loudest get heard, and
they're not even speaking a language.
Yeah, it's
noise. You just hear the noise, but nothing, and it's all surface. There's nothing that goes into the primordial gut. Coffin, we got to do part 2, man. This was I'm interviewing Stuart Levine from Uni Records, Masakela's guy right now. So let's. I hope you had a great hang. I had a ball, man, and I appreciate your perspective. Yeah, we'll do more. All right, definitely, man.
Right on.
Be cool, man.
Thanks, brother.
Bless you, brother.
Take care.
Later. We'll be back with Stuart Levine right after this.